What's up everyone, Matthew here, and in this video I will walk through one of the material presets available right now on my Patreon for Threadweaver 1.2. The purpose of this video, again, as I mentioned, to make it easier to break it down and help you jumpstart your next material creation with clear direction on how to control this OSL node. So looking here on our node graph, on top I have an IPR running in Redshift Cinema 4D, and on the left here we're looking at all the controls inside that Threadweaver OSL. Inside the node graph here I have an open PBR material with few nodes connected: color, fuzz color, I have bump and displacement, pretty self-explanatory, and inside here I have a bit of a fuzz roughness added, and I've reduced a little bit of the specular color or the weight, as well as I reduced the base color just because my input here is a bit bright, but it depends on changing colors that you will pick for your material. Looking here closer on that OSL node and what I have connected to it, I'm controlling the color A and B for thread A and B. I also have base color, which is the kind of, think of it as the canvas of this pattern. This is the color for the canvas. Usually it will not show if you're using the output mask for transparency, whether it's for opacity or transmission. Back there on the left side, I have inside that driver group, I have a noise that is feeding one of the colors inside the tiles pattern generator inside Cinema 4D, and this tiles is just controlling the color and only changing one rotation setting inside of the OSL. So if I change the tiles here from triangles to maybe radial lines or just regular lines, you'll see that it's changing everything here. And if I just show the plus surface on top to get a clear pattern description here, I'll get closer and look at the pattern and disconnect that rotate. So you see a uniform tile of little lines that look like threads. And this is basically what Threadweaver is. It's just a pattern generator. It's just faking the look of threads. Going from top to bottom, I'll walk you through quickly, talk general on what each one of those do. The first one is UV, controlling the tile count, the aspect ratio. So lower number of tile multiplier, you get a bigger pattern. Depending on the size of your fabric or the size of your object, you can control that. And then you have also additional tile count control depending on the aspect ratio of your actual model, whether you want to have it uniform number or like to have one side that have more tiles. This is also controlled in aspect ratio, but aspect ratio will cause stretching. So if you want to stretch it on whatever direction to compensate the tile count, or to actually go for a stretched thread look. Next, we have the UV input and offset. If you're going to control your Threadweaver using a triplanar OSL, if your model doesn't have a good UV. And then rotate. This is rotating the threads pattern. It's not rotating the tile generator. This is outside here, so you can actually rotate this from the actual driver. Of course, you can use an image to control your pattern as well inside Threadweaver. Next to it, you have thread A, B, and C. Those are three different lines or dots that you can use as three different threads interweaving. I am only using A and B in this preset, so I'm going to hide C, and you get to see here inside spacing, thickness, and so on and so forth. I think I went through this multiple times in different videos, but I'll walk through this quickly. The first, let's create a clean OSL to start from scratch. And connect a color correct node to see what we're getting here. And let's go to that new one, start from scratch. Let's zero out thread C and B. Let's kill also radial smoothing. So now we're looking at only one tile to control, and I will increase the multiplier to get a clear pattern look. So basically this pattern generator is creating circles or squares with dashed lines. You can of course kill the dash so you can look at just circles. You're changing the size of the circles so the circles start to interlock or intersect. And then you can change the thickness of each one of those circles. And then you can start introducing gaps to fake the up and bottom thread alignment. You can shift that phase to create different interlocking patterns, and then you can rotate the entire tile or container of this circle. Changing the color, roughness is another color output, and then changing the aspect ratio of the shape. So we'll turn a circle into an oval, so I'll reduce the thickness. I will kill the dash for a moment here, reduce the scale of each of those circles. You have aspect ratio on each direction. So once it's introduced again the gap, and then increase the density, increasing the scale, thickness, and then start blurring. There's two different types of blur. Let's reduce this again. The first type of blur is tangential smoothing. It will smooth the dash to gap area. And there's two types of blur. If we go to general here, picking legacy will blur the dash into the background. So it's kind of increasing the dash back again. It's recovering it while it's making it smoother or softer. The opposite is the modern. It kind of goes inward. So depending on the look that you're after, you can pick the type of blur that you're using. Radial smoothing will smooth the inner and outer edges of your lines. Note that the radial smoothing will override the thickness. So plan this when you're designing your pattern. I'll increase the spacing again. I'll reduce the thickness. Less dash length means more space in black. This black is transparent if you would use the mask output. So let's start designing something. Before I continue, the only setting in UV that's not very explained here is pixels per UV. Think of it as a multiplier or iteration. The larger that number, the less effective these values. So if I increase pixels per UV, you'll find that the thickness and the blur and the spacing are decreasing. This helps when you're having high resolution renders and you want to increase the scale of your pattern without losing details. Continue to adjust or tweak those settings until we get something that looks like nice fabric. Weave. That looks interesting. I'll change the color. Notice that we're looking at diffuse output only. It's just a color, but it looks a little bit shaded. This is because there is a setting here called shading and it's enabled by default. If I were to disable this, you have flat color that is just blurred to black. If I were to enable it back again, increase it, you'll see there's just another layer of those threads or circles, but it's brighter. And you can control how thick and how blurred it is, just to help you fake the 3D look of each thread. Roughness, if you were to use the roughness output and connect it into your material, you get to control the roughness of each thread of the three. So you can make it very glossy if you're using a metallic or glossy fabric threads, or you can make it more rough. Of course, it becomes handy if you have B and C. Notice that you have a background color. This is the fabric or the canvas background. As I mentioned before, if you would use the mask, it will be transparent. But in roughness, if you would not remove this background and transparency, you can set this setting individually as well. Maybe you want to have a background gloss or super rough. Back to the color output. You have aspect ratio, control, and then we have the phase gap to rotate. That looks interesting. And this huge gap between each one of those can be filled by thread B. So let's introduce thread B into our pattern. Give it a bit of a gap here. And you see that it's straight on our thread A. So I'll just rotate relative to thread A. And maybe change the spacing until I fill this black gap. And then I'll give it a different color. And if we go to general, I have thread A bias. It kind of makes thread A go over against B and C. So now thread B is kind of underneath. To add more to the realism, you can use the tangential smoothing to blur the edges of the dash for thread B and reduce the length of thread B. Between radial smoothing and tangential smoothing, you can fake or make it more realistic thread interlocking and interweaving one on top of each other. Radial smoothing bias kind of does the same as inward and outward blurring. So it's either making it very thin or bleed outside the thread itself. All right, let's go to the UV section again and increase the tone multiplier now. And maybe change the aspect ratio to get rid of this a little bit of stretchy look. And maybe we can use one side to have maybe 12 tiles. And this will be 20. There's another setting here that you can control, which is the shape. All what we were building before was based on a circle element. If I were to go back and kill thread B, you can make your base element square if you're after the look of sharper weaves like carbon fiber and so on. Of course, you have a normal output, and you get to see that it's a bit sharp here, so I'll increase the scale here by decreasing the tile. I go to normal controls. You can control the strength. You can rotate the normal direction. In some situation, you want to control that. And also you can blur it to make it smooth. So it's not too sharp, especially in animation that helps. You have also control to change few random settings here. You can add some randomness, either per unit or per an entire line. So if I choose this here, you get to see that there's a whole row of imperfection or rotation happening here. You also have skip every, let's say 6, and say every 12 here. Increase this. You get to see it's skipping around here. So that also helps kind of within the shader give you more control on different fabrics. Combine this with the mask and you have really cool material. No need to create those outside in textures, export it into textures, 4K or 6K or whatever, load roughness, load normal, load the base color, no more. And the good thing is that those settings and this OSL shader is compatible with a lot of DCCs out there. So without needing textures, without licensing problem, without having to think about where did I save my textures. You can share this between different team members and it will give you the same exact look across different DCCs, mostly. But yeah, I recommend it for you. Go on my Patreon. There is a download page where you can download the presets or watch more videos on how to build more materials like this. Thanks for watching.